Here we go. This is it. Fire up. Quarter season down. We are here. Welcome in to Snapchat Society. It is your host, The Buff, here with a breakdown, a little bite-sized breakdown. I'm going to call it the bite-sized buff. Everyone knows me. I am less, and I'm the furthest thing from bite-sized, but we're going to do a bite-sized breakdown of what's happened week 4 in the NFL and look ahead to some of the guys that we are trying to get off of your waivers. So what can you expect from today's show? Nice bite-sized episode. We're going to go 15, 20 minutes. Me and you going solo today to go through what's happened before the boys are back on later in the week to look ahead to week 5. So plenty happening on the weekend, and I think that it'd be really, really, I guess the best way to start would be to just do a little bit of buff breakdown of what's happened, okay, before we lead into a little bit of medical tent and the waiver wire, and then I'll send you off with some final thoughts before you process your waivers tomorrow on Wednesday. I guess when we look back at week 4 and what was, okay, we've seen the Pittsburgh Steelers, my beloved Steelers, have got out to a commanding lead in the AFC North. And obviously we're only one game ahead of the Cincinnati Bengals, but after watching them on Monday Night Football today, they definitely do not have what it takes there with Jake Browning under center. And I guess looking ahead to future weeks, we can get Stevie's thoughts later in the week, but they are definitely in need of getting another quarterback in there under center to support the elite weapons that they do have on the outside. Moving on to some other games and around the league, the Chiefs just find a way. I know that I tipped Baltimore to get a win on the weekend, but they just find a way with no Rice coming back, but they had Xavier Worthy back out there on the field, and more weapons for Mahomes means that he's equally more dangerous now and getting back to some of his best in real life, but obviously in fantasy. And I think he was QB3 on the week, had a fantastic week, and they move themselves and get themselves to 2-2 while the Ravens move to 1-3 with just a plethora of injuries, which we'll go through when we hit the medical tent and we get those updates. A little bit of a thought, because Cowboys definitely been game of the year so far, 40-40. Look, I'm going to echo the sentiments from everyone around in the industry, anyone that follows NFL, that we need a win in that game. The fact that that game ended in a tie is just absolutely criminal, and really would have been fantastic to see that game end with a winner. I know some of the thoughts that have been echoed in terms of, and I guess spoken about around the league, about what could potentially be a tiebreaker in that situation. And I love that idea. Going to take this one and the credit that's come from Pat McAfee with the kickers and the kicking units heading out there with, it could be a 40 or a 45-yard field goal to start. If the game's tied at the end of overtime regulation and you have a sudden death kickoff, and it's just field goal kicking units they're out there. You got the opposition defense coming at them, and with the amount of teams that have been blocking field goals, just adds that extra element in terms of guys trying to get home and block those field goals. But if a team makes it from 40, let's say 40 yards, both teams make it, you bring it back to 45, and then after you bring it back to 50, and then afterwards you bring it back to 55. And it's just probably a good way to find a winner in the game, but we're not increasing the risk of injury, not just in that week, increasing the game load for those NFL teams and those players that are out there that have been out there for a whole 60 minutes of gameplay plus the 10 minutes. And so we've got 70 minutes of gameplay. It'd be a good way to maybe find that winner with, obviously that field goal kicking unit. And thinking to the Packers and the Cowboys, if that came down to, and let's say they get through 3 or 4 field goal kicks in the shootout, and you've got Aubrey and McManus with these massive legs going from 60 or 65 yards, I think that would just add completely another element to the game. So it'll be interesting to see what the league do over the offseason. I know there's been some changes to the overtime rules in the last 2 years, but it'd be great to see that. And just, I guess, moving to the teams that are 4-0 and the teams that are 0-4. Eagles and the Bills roll on. They're the only 4-0 teams left in the league now. I know the Eagles have a bit of a drama there with AJ Brown, and he's come out on socials even just before releasing that he's, I guess not feeling the joy of what should come when you're a champion, but the joy comes from the journey. So we're interested to see what happens there. If he's going to, be there, they're really going to maintain and keep that same setup there with him. And the Bills just keep rolling on. Obviously, they played against the Saints. The Saints probably put up a bit better fight than what most people would have thought, but the Bills got the job done, and that's what matters when we look at it right now. We do the other side, Jets, Titans, Saints, still winless. I mean, the Jets have definitely looked better than Jets on previous years. When we think back to that Tampa Bay game, they were pretty unlucky to walk into a red hot dog in Baker Mayfield, but today penalties cost them. And it's just it's so unforgivable when you're out there on an NFL field to have penalties cost you a win. But that's what happened today against the Dolphins. I think they definitely, at times, they looked like a better team. Moving to the other teams, the Titans, I just don't know what's happening with the Titans and being shut out by the Texans, who definitely haven't started the year very well themselves. And then the Saints are still winless. And I don't think that's a surprise to too many people. Probably the surprise is that the Giants are able to now, they've got themselves a win and they're out of that winless group. That was probably the team pre-season that had most people looking as if they could have been the team that could have been winless throughout the year. But that's probably my breakdown of the week. There were definitely some good games in there. The Rams and the Colts was a fantastic game. The Colts they fumbled themselves out of that game. But yeah, some great games. That's my little bite-sized breakdown of what the week was before we move ahead, and we're going to transition into our next segment. And we are going to start with the medical tent. Okay, a lot of injuries that occurred on the weekend, which sadly, after the week that was in week 3, we find ourselves looking at more injuries and I guess the impact, the implications that are going to occur in real life football and for our fantasy lineups. So I guess we'll start with probably the most damaging, the season-changing injuries. The Tyreek Hill gruesome knee, leg injury, whatever it was not good. And look, thoughts and prayers, honestly, go out to Tyreek Hill. He's definitely starting to look like the player that we know he can be, and was putting up a decent sized number. And it probably, him coming out of the game, impacted Jalen Waddle in a way as well, with Sauce Gardner going to him later in the game. But we hope that Tyreek Hill can get that physical therapy that he needs, that rehab, and hopefully find him back out in an NFL field, sometime in the future. We definitely don't expect it to be this year. So Tyreek Hill, from my understanding, wait till we get some official confirmation. But if you have him in redraft, I would be dropping him from your roster. The other person that you'd be dropping from your roster in a redraft league is Malik Nabers, the wide receiver from the New York Giants, who unfortunately has done his ACL. Again, elite player. It's damaging and it's really tragic and catastrophic to your lineup, but we're going to go through what some potential fixes could be, not just today, but later in the week with Stevie and Goat when they return and we get our full-sized episode out to you. But Tyreek Hill, Malik Nabers are probably the two the headline-making injuries, season-changing injuries. I'm going to move into some multi-week injuries now. Joe Alt wanted to go back out in the field. It's been reported by Adam Schefter that he wants to be out in the field. The tackle from the Chargers, which I guess is really tragic for them, is that they lost Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, their original left tackle, which meant that Joel moved across to the left side from the right to look after blindside of Justin Herbert. Now, he's got a high ankle sprain, his syndesmosis, and it doesn't look too good. It's definitely like if you're making an investment in a player of that caliber, he is a guy that could potentially be the highest paid lineman in the league one day. He's a fantastic talent. So we're just going to watch on that ankle. I guess in the meantime, with both him and Slater out, we can see the impact that it's not just having, not just on the running game, but I guess on Justin Herbert, the confidence and the security that he's feeling in the pocket. So in the meantime, I guess what we're probably going to see is them try to game plan. If they are running passing plays, they're going to try to get the ball out quicker. But watching on that Joel injury, he's a tough bugger. He's a real tough bastard. He wants to be out in the field, but certain injuries you probably don't want to let star players try to play through. So I'd expect him to miss some time with that. I've got just noted here, we have Roquan Smith with his hamstring. We know that Matabuike is out with season-long neck injury, and the continued, and there's multiple absences for the Ravens at the moment, with Jair Alexander's out. We've seen Marlon Humphrey come out on the weekend as well. The Ravens DST is not a defense you want to be starting in fantasy with these injuries. So I would probably be maybe not try, like you want to see what else is out there, but definitely want to rethink if you have the Ravens DST as your defense in fantasy. In terms of monitoring situations, some of these guys are injuries that are pre-existing and guys that missed week 4. Other guys have been banged up during week 4. So things that we need to monitor, Braylon Allen, we want to monitor the situation with his knee injury, came out of the game today against the Dolphins for the New York Jets. Obviously, we know Breece Hall is a starter there, but let's monitor that. If he continues to miss time, it could be worth picking up an Isaiah Davis as that handcuff to Breece. But I'll probably expect Breece to continue to see some elevated and uptick in workload with Braylon Allen out. Juwan Jennings came back. He did end up playing on the weekend, but unfortunately on the touchdown pass that he caught, he copped a pretty bad shot to the rib. So his ribs and ankle, he is playing banged up right now. And it leads me to the next guy, like San Fran, absolutely copying it. Ricky Pearsall is also someone we need to monitor throughout the week with training camp. It has been estimated because they have a short week, they didn't actually train today. Ricky Pearsall would have missed today's training session. So let's just watch the injury reports throughout the week. And we will try our best as well to get information out to the community. But Ricky Pearsall and Juwan Jennings look like they could potentially miss next week's game on a shorter week. They are playing Thursday night football. So they're playing the Friday game against the Rams. So they're going to go in pretty undermanned. Obviously, we know Kittle's out as well. In terms of other situations around the league, we want to monitor Terry McLaurin and his situation. He looks like he could return in week 5 for the Washington Commanders. Monitor that one in particular for if you're a Deebo Samuel GM and you have him rostered, but just in terms of, it'd be great to obviously have him out in the field for the Commanders overall. And it looks like Jaden Daniels hopefully will return this week as well. We had obviously had Marcus Mariota, who's been okay for fantasy the last couple of weeks, but for the wide receivers and their usage and their efficiency, we definitely want to have Jaden Daniels back. And I think it's a good thing for the Commanders overall if Terry McLaurin is out there on the field. We'll see better quality targets and hopefully less coverage for Deebo Samuel if Terry McLaurin is out there. Obviously knowing that Terry will obviously take some targets as well. So other guys to watch around the league include Taysom Hill and Tyjae Spears, who have been on IR to start the season. Now, the reason why we want to monitor these guys, I don't think Tyjae Spears will get rushed back into a situation. They're 0-4. They're winless, obviously. I don't think they're going to rush him back and have him back on the field, but he's expected to practice this week and be at training. So is Taysom Hill, who I think is coming off IR. So we want to watch him as well at New Orleans. We know Jawan Johnson has started the season on fire. So it'll just be really interesting to see. Obviously, Taysom Hill's a bit more of a gadget player, but he is listed at tight end. And we want to see what will happen with that usage. I don't expect it to happen to impact Taysom Hill too much, but I do in this sense of Tyjae Spears when he does eventually return with a winless roster, knowing that Tony Pollard is an aging running back. I don't think he'll end up seeing all of the work to Tyjae Spears, but I think Tyjae Spears eventually will come back into play, and we'll cover that in the waiver wire rankings. Some obvious ones, some absolute studs that we need to continue to watch this week in terms of injury reports. It has been said and reported, CeeDee Lamb, Schottenheim has come out and said that CeeDee will not be going into reserve, which means that he will be tracking for a return. If it's not this week, the next week, hopefully. Obviously, we saw George Pickens absolutely ball out in the weekend, but that offense as a whole is so much better with CeeDee Lamb out in the field. Yes, George Pickens will get less looks when CeeDee Lamb returns, but it's definitely someone that we want to monitor and keep our eye on. And if you can get him, if there's a team desperate, they need points this week, maybe you can go out and get a CeeDee Lamb, knowing he's probably not playing this week, maybe not the week after, but he hopefully will be back in that 2 to 3 weeks from now sort of window. Lamar Jackson, final one that we have here in terms of some elite players. With his hamstring, he came out of the game against the Chiefs. It'd be really interesting to know that if they were in the game, would he have stayed out in the field? My guess is yes, he would have stayed out in the field if they were in the position to try and win the game. I think that they just monitoring that situation. They got him out of there in terms of management. Really interesting. Again, we're going to monitor the news in terms of the Ravens offense as a whole will be downgraded heavily if he is to miss and Cooper Rush does replace him this week. Bucky Irving from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers has popped up on an injury report. Banged up in the weekend, a little bit sore. So again, we want to monitor practice reports this week, and hopefully he is a go for next week. But we could potentially see Rashad White see an uptick in usage, knowing that Bucky is a little bit on the smaller side and is already starting to feel the effects of the season, and it's only through week 4. Other guys that probably we need to just keep an eye on again. Alan Warren, they have a bye this week, Pittsburgh. You'd expect him to probably return in week 6. The game well filled in more than admirably, had a match-winning performance really for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So even when Jalen Warren returns, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kenneth Gainwell get some more usage than what was happening pre-Jalen Warren missing. But again, let's monitor the situation and just keep that cautiously at the back of our mind. Darnell Mooney also came out of the game for the Atlanta Falcons as a wide receiver. Drake London, I know that he's getting big raps. We have a few people out in the community in the industry that are really been singing Drake London's praises. But if we look at some statistics, you will see if you compare and look at where Drake London's 100-yard games have come from, they've only really occurred when Darnell Mooney has been out injured. There's one game where Darnell Mooney didn't leave injured. Drake London went over 100 yards in the last 2-3 years. Darnell Mooney also went over 100 yards in that game. And obviously the offense really balled out that particular game. So look, they're very similar in terms of their yards per game when they do play together. And we want to watch that situation, not just for Darnell Mooney, but if you are a Drake London GM, and I'd be advising that if you can sell high on a particular player this week, it would be to sell Drake London if you can. Absolutely brutal week this week. Second week in a row where it's been brutal. And I guess this is where we see handcuffs and depth on your roster can really, really benefit a fantasy GM. So with that in mind, we're going to move across and we're going to get into our waiver wire targets for this week. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through position by position, my top 5 guys to try and go and get. And I'm going to give a little bit of a FAAB percentage as well for your budgets, just so you know who to go and get and what to spend. For our running backs, no surprise here that our number 1 pickup of the week is Woody Marks from Houston. Stat line of 17 carries, 9 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. And through the air, he had 4 of 5 catches. So 4 catches of 5 targets for 50 yards and a touchdown. He's not now, and we've seen it over the week, a trend of him with increased usage. I would be spending 35 to 55% of my FAAB, and I would not begrudge anyone to go even higher if you are a running back needy and desperate team. He has taken over Nick Chubb's role as the RB1 in my eyes, and I would go and get Woody Marks. He's probably the only running back out there for this week moving forward that could be the guy moving forward for the rest of the season. The other running backs that we want to target out in the waiver wire at the moment, just to preface this as well, there might be some other running backs out there in your leagues that could potentially be a better fit. What I've done with these running back waiver wire rankings and for other positions is they have to be rostered in less than 50% of leagues across the different platforms. If you see other guys out there and you're not sure, please flick through a message. But guys that we want to maybe just stash for some upside, Tyjae Spears, as I mentioned earlier, is an upside stash. He won't be rushed back, but with that in mind, we want to maybe spend 3 to 8%, knowing that he will be returning in the next couple of weeks. It will happen, and he will see some usage, and he will see increased usage as the weeks and the year drags on. Kenneth Gainwell is my 3rd running back that I would be picking up. 19 carries for 99 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then he had 6 catches of 6 targets for 35 yards. I'd probably be spending 3 to 5%. If you're desperate for a running back, I'd be okay with you spending 8 to 12% of your FAAB budget to get Kenneth Gainwell on your roster. Reason why we're not going to go overs with our FAAB budget for Kenny is that he is out. He's not playing this week because we have a bye for Pittsburgh in week 5. They're returning week 6, and Jaylen Warren could potentially be the starting running back in that game. So again, we're going to monitor Jaylen Warren's injury reports, but Kenneth Gainwell is someone that you can definitely go out and get. Kendo Miller's the next running back on my list. He had a breakout game, probably the best game that he's had as pro. He had 11 carries for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. He had a touchdown and Alvin Kamara didn't. The Saints are 0-4. Alvin Kamara's workload could shrink moving forward. Just thinking about his age, the usage, and the hits that he's taken in his career. From a management perspective, they may start to create a little bit more of a committee, maybe to preserve Kamara going into next year. Another angle that we could potentially think about too is, do they try to move Kamara to a contender? Some team that's out there that maybe has a bit of cap space, has a younger quarterback that's not on their non-rookie deal yet, that can take Kamara in and absorb his particular salary, which is quite high for running back. But Kendo Miller, again, it's probably a 0 to 4% play. If you're running back desperate, you can go 5 to 10%. Just hoping, again, with buys coming up, he could be a good guy to have on your bench that you're able to plug in and play as a flex play. The other one, that last one that we have on our list, number 5, is Rachaad White. We're going to monitor the Bucky Irving injury and what his status is on the report. He's banged up. I think that in the next week or two, we could see increased usage for Rachaad White just purely from a management perspective of Bucky Irving. But if Bucky Irving were to miss, Rachaad White becomes a must start with that Tampa Bay offense absolutely humming. Other guys that we've spoken about in previous weeks that we would stash: Blake Corum for the Los Angeles Rams. We spoke about the monogamous relationships that Sean McVay loves to have with his running backs, and he only likes to trust one guy. Blake Corum would come into that role again, similar to the Rashad White. He becomes a must start if Kyron Williams from the Rams were to miss any time. Ollie Gordon from Miami had a quieter game, but someone that you could feel comfortable stashing and just grabbing for minimal dollars off the waiver wire. Kyle Monongai from Chicago. It's very similar with the DeAndre Swift situation in Chicago. He looks a little bit banged up too. He had an okay game, Swift, but again, if he were to miss and he comes into that role as a starting running back, it is a decent offense. The ball will be moving and he will get some touches. Moving into our wide receivers, number one for us number one for me this week, who I want to target is Wan'Dale Robinson. He's the default wide receiver one for Jaxson Dart. You could probably make an argument that Darius Slayton could be that man too, but I think moving forward, Wan'Dale has definitely been the more effective of the two. And I think that with Jaxson Dart coming in, they will start to game plan Wan'Dale in that role as the person that if Jaxson Dart feels pressure, he's going to be the first read and they're going to be looking to get Wan'Dale Robinson the ball. For wide receivers, I'm probably spending a little bit less. I'm probably going to keep a bit of FAAB in my budget just later in the year, just in case we can get a must-start running back off the waiver wire. But if you're in need of points this week, I'd be fully comfortable with you going out and spending 10 to 12% of your FAAB budget, even more if you really need to get a wide receiver on your roster to go and get Wan'Dale Robinson. Secondly, Romeo Doubs from Green Bay, the man with the Guardian Bay Crackers. 3 TDs over the weekend. I guess what we're looking for here is, can we take that lotto ticket that we might get Love's wide receiver one? I put 3 to 5%. That's probably a conservative bid. Again, probably okay with you spending 8 to 10% and chasing that touchdown upside. He's not going to replicate that. He won't have 3 touchdowns in a game. They're not going to play the Dallas Cowboys every week, and they will be able to run the ball on other teams. But look, if you can get Romeo Doubs and he can come in, have 5 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown, that's a great day. That's someone that you want in your fantasy lineups. Absolutely target Romeo Doubs if he's out there on your waiver wire. Number 3 is Alec Ayamanor from Tennessee. His targets are climbing. He didn't have a great week. No one for Tennessee did. But Calvin Ridley is banged up. He's playing through injury. And we've seen over the last couple of weeks, as I said, the targets are climbing. He's probably becoming Cam Warren's number one target. Go and get Alec while you can, and you can probably get him for 5 FAAB, okay? Marvin Mims is number 4 on my list from Denver. He had 6 catches off 6 targets for 69 yards, a rushing attempt for 16 yards, and a touchdown on the ground today. I think he's obviously a fantastic option. It leads in my number 5 option as well. Corey Franklin, okay, he definitely has seen target volume is still there. Didn't have a great game today, but either of those 2 options from Denver, if you need a wide receiver, they're both getting looks behind Courtland Sutton. I think Denver put up 512 yards of offense today. We won't see that every week, but look, if you can get one of those 2 on your line into your roster and you need to start someone, you can probably take a flyer on either of those guys in a flex if you absolutely have to. And that's what we're going to see and what we're going to need as those buys start to pile up. We're going to have 4 teams on buy this weekend, but that is going to increase over the coming weeks. Some short-term flyers. I know I mentioned CeeDee Lamb being sidelined earlier. Jalen Tolbert and Kevontae Turpin had decent games on the weekend, respectively. I'm okay if you need to go and get a Kevontae Turpin or a Jalen Tolbert to fill a hole in the next week or 2, or you just want to see what they're able to maybe achieve while CD's out. If he's out even longer, it'd be an even bigger win. So if you want to take a flyer on either of those 2, they're honorable mentions for me. Moving to tight ends, Darren Waller from Miami, first game in a couple of years, and geez, he looked good. He had 3 catches of 4 targets for 27 yards and 2 TVs. He's back. The big wars. We love to see it. He's a fantastic player. I think that as the season goes on, he will start to get more and more looks. Obviously, with Tyreek Hill out, I think he's a complete must-add off the waiver wire if he is out there. Jalen Waddle can't get all of the targets, and they don't really have too many other wide receivers outside of Washington that maybe can step up and make plays for them in the wide receiver room. So I think in the receiving game, definitely go out and get Darren Waller. If he doesn't get those, I guess, between the 20s looks that we're probably used to have seen him when he was playing with the Raiders, less so with the Giants, but more so with the Raiders, we know at least Tua's going to be looking for that big target down in the red zone to get him in the end zone. And we saw that today. Brenton Strange, eye test, he looks good. He looks fantastic. His numbers are starting to match up with that. So he's my number 2 tight end for this week. Number 3 is Dalton Schultz from Houston. I think he presents a safe 8 to 10 point floor. I don't think he's going to have many monster weeks, but we've seen in the past that he's able to string a couple together and maybe get off the leash in the red zone. So he's another guy that we can add as a tight end if you're looking for someone to fill a hole as well. Mason Taylor, the rookie tight end from New York Jets. He's really impressing me. He's number 4 on my list. He had 5 catches from 7 targets for 65 yards. And look, to be honest, he could probably on any other given week have been higher on my list and maybe could even interchange and move to number 3 with Dalton Schultz. I think he presents a fair bit of upside, knowing that, again, much like Miami, where the Jets have Garrett Wilson, they don't have much behind him in terms of target competition. So I think Mason Taylor is a great play, and particularly if they're going to find themselves behind and having to throw the ball. I've got number 5 on my list, a bit of a high upside dart throw, but Elijah Arroyo from Seattle looked really great. I know that AJ Barner's there and they sort of split a lot of time. They run quite a lot of 2 tight end personnel, but I think that he really looks dangerous in terms of having chunk plays. And Darnold was looking for him in certain situations. I think he's a really dangerous tight end. He's quite athletic, and I think he's only going to get better as the season goes on. Look, in Dynasty, he's not going to be out in your waivers, but if you can get him in a Dynasty for a really late pick, that could be a play to make as well. Moving to quarterbacks, I've just got 3 this week that I want to look at. Sam Darnold, I think, presents a safe floor for fantasy, even though sometimes in real life he can be shaky. Last couple of weeks, he's been in around that quarterback 16-18 range. And if you have a quarterback that's coming up to bye week, whether it's this week or in a couple of weeks, and you need someone to make a spot start, I think Sam Darnold, you could go a lot worse than him. I think he provides, as I said, a safe floor. He'll get you your 18 to 20 points, and that's sometimes all you need so that your skill position players can do the rest. Geno Smith, he's a garbage time hero, number 2 on my list. Looking really shaky in real life. They're behind, but they're going to have to throw the ball. And we've seen in the last couple of weeks when that's happened, they are absolutely slinging it. He's racking up a large amount of yardage and touchdown plays. Yes, he's going to get you some interceptions, but I think that bringing Geno Smith into your roster as a spot start, you could do a lot worse. And finally, the man that everyone's talking about, number 3 on my list is Jaxson Dart. Look, obviously had a fantastic game. Kind of skeptical and tempering expectations that it's going to continue because NFL organizations and coaching staff, what they do is they pick apart people's tape. They look for what particular tendencies present themselves and where they can exploit. I think it's going to be really hard for Jaxson Dart to have, sustained success on the level that he had on the weekend. But throwing all of that away, he's fun, he's got moxie, and he's worth a dart throw. So my dart throw of the week for quarterbacks as number 3 and number 3 option is Jaxson Dart from the New York Giants. That wraps up my position by position plays. I guess summarizing my waiver wire plays, I'm going to move ahead to my final thought. My waiver wire out of the week, as I said, is Woody Marks. Go and get him. Spend half your FAAB. Spend more if you really need a running back. That's the guy that you could get that could elevate your roster from a losing record into a winning record. Go and get him. Put him on your roster. Start him now. Outside of that, Darren Waller presents a really juicy option. Wan'Dale Robinson is my best wide receiver out of the week. And if you want to have a little bit of fun and you can go and get Jaxson Dart, you might have Scatterbill on your roster as well. Get that stack and support the G-Man, particularly if, for whatever reason, you go for the New York Giants. If you have any trade questions or there's any other players that are out on your waiver wires that you're unsure about, maybe you're looking at whether you drop a player or not, please reach out onto our socials. Myself, Stevie, and the GOAT are online all week, and we can help you out and give you the best advice that we can. In terms of what's coming up and coming forward, we have the Quarter Time Huddle episode dropping later in the week. Stevie, GOAT, and myself are going to break down and look at our rankings. We're going to update our consensus rankings for you all. But what we also are going to do is start looking at where have we got things right and where have we got things wrong, and explain, maybe delve into a little bit of why. And we may even see some victory laps, maybe too early, but we'll also see some hands potentially be raised. So keep your eyes peeled to that one. That one's being recorded on Saturday, a little bit later in the week, but it's going to have a lot more than just your typical week 5 preview in that. I'm 3-1 in the Creator League for the Snapcount Society, 4-0 in the Snapcount Society Listener League. It'd be fantastic to get some thoughts and share whether you're 0-4 or 4-0, share your rosters. Let us know where we can help you. And we look forward to another big week. Outside of that, that's the buff size breakdown. Hope you all have a fantastic week, and we'll see you guys real soon.